Joshua never expected the truth to hit him this hard. Not inside a modest Newark office, not during a routine audit, and definitely not from the tiny voices of two toddlers who should have been strangers to him. Yet, the moment he stepped into Franca's workspace, something shifted. He carried documents, spreadsheets, and authority. But all of that fell away when two little faces peeked out from the hallway, curiosity lighting their eyes like small sparks. Franca froze first. Then Joshua did. Her son stepped forward boldly, as if he instinctively knew something important was unfolding. Her daughter stood close behind him, clutching a stuffed toy with both hands. Joshua's breath caught as he stared at them, at the features he couldn't deny, at the expressions that mirrored his own childhood photos more accurately than any memory could. But nothing hit harder than the moment her daughter pointed directly at him, eyes wide with innocent certainty. "You look like us." It was as though the entire room stopped breathing. That single sentence cracked open everything. His past, his assumptions, his understanding of Franca's silence. Raw, immediate, life-altering. Franca stood with a steady strength, though her heartbeat raced beneath the surface. Joshua could practically feel the fear and courage woven together in her posture. She wasn't defensive. She wasn't apologetic. She was bracing for whatever came next. The twins stared up at him, waiting. Joshua's carefully controlled world trembled. Because billionaires can prepare for market shifts, financial risk, even lawsuits. But no amount of training prepares a man for the moment he realizes he is looking at his own children for the very first time. Let me ask you this. Because real life isn't always neat or predictable, have you ever kept something to yourself? Not out of pride, but because you feared losing the peace you fought so hard to build? Or maybe you've walked away from someone you loved, not because you stopped caring, but because both of you needed room to breathe, even if neither of you said it aloud. Sometimes life circles back in ways we never planned. Sometimes love waits. Sometimes truth arrives at the exact moment we least expect. Joshua wasn't standing in Franca's office as her ex-husband. He wasn't even standing there as a man still carrying unanswered feelings. He was there as a CEO, an auditor, sent to evaluate her business with precision and authority. But instead, he was confronted with the biggest truth of his life. Because in that instant, Joshua understood something deep and painful. Franca hadn't been protecting the twins from him. She had been protecting them from the pressure, politics, and suffocating expectations of his world. And strangely, he couldn't blame her. A man can run a global empire and still realize he failed to see what mattered most. So the question becomes, what does a man do when the empire he built collides with the family he never knew he had? Will he cling to power or choose love and responsibility over everything he once prioritized? Stay with me, because this story isn't just about discovery. It's about growth, justice, second chances, and the courage it takes to rebuild what life once broke apart. Heavenly Father, bless every person listening right now. Give them peace in their hearts, clarity in their decisions, and strength in their daily battles. Let this story inspire hope, healing, and purpose. Cover their families, their dreams, and their homes with your protection and grace. And welcome to Mr. Michael's Stories Hub, where America's greatest stories and life lessons meet creativity and heart. If you're new to the family, we're grateful to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more unforgettable stories your way. New Jersey winters had a personality of their own, cold enough to quiet the city, sharp enough to reveal whatever people tried to hide. The wind carried a clarity Franca had grown to appreciate, almost like it reminded her that truth survives even in the harshest seasons. Newark had a way of looking honest in the winter, and Franca felt aligned with that truth every time she unlocked the glass door of her small logistics consulting office. Her business wasn't grand or decorated with corporate extravagance. It sat on a block filled with hard-working entrepreneurs, barbershops, family bakeries, repair shops, and offices run by people who understood resilience better than most. Her company occupied a modest suite with tall industrial windows that allowed natural light to stretch across the wooden floors. Sunbeams broke through the cold morning, painting soft golden streaks across framed photos of her twins resting on every shelf. Her daughter's smile was wide, expressive, full of curiosity. Her son's eyes carried a thoughtful seriousness that often made people pause. They were her center, her purpose, the heartbeat of every decision she made. When they were born, she promised herself that their lives would be guided by calm, not chaos, by structure, not pressure, by love, not noise. That promise shaped everything. The office was quiet this morning, except for the low hum of the heater fighting against the winter cold. Franca placed her coffee on her desk, the same desk she assembled herself 3 years ago when she started the business with nothing but determination and a quiet confidence. She had 2 employees now, and a growing list of clients who respected her reliability. Nothing about her success was accidental. Every inch of progress was earned. Peace, independence, and stability, those 3 values were more than words to her. They were survival, identity, and purpose. She fought for those things daily, not because life required drama, but because she refused to let her past define the atmosphere her children would grow up in. She wanted stillness around them, a kind of quiet foundation she never had growing up. Her twins were in the next room, surrounded by blocks, tiny books, and cheerful distractions. They played as if the world belonged to them, completely unaware of the storm that was inching its way into their peaceful orbit. Franca watched them through the glass partition. They were 2 years old, confident walkers, loud talkers, and endlessly curious. Her daughter tapped the window with a plastic toy, laughing as her brother constructed a tall tower of blocks beside her. Franca smiled. This ordinary calm was what she had built. She sat down and began reviewing the day's tasks, scheduling, inventory reports, client updates. Everything felt predictable, steady, just the way she loved it. Her life now, though far from luxurious, held a kind of freedom money couldn't buy. But the contrast between her world and Joshua's was impossible to ignore. His life was governed by status, strategy, and the endless pursuit of expansion. Boardrooms, wisers, numbers that dance across screens, in skyscrapers. Meanwhile, Franca managed her company with handwritten notes, reliable software, and a quiet strength that didn't need applause. His world demanded control. Hers thrived on balance. She didn't resent his success. Not then, not now. She simply recognized that peace could never exist beside constant pressure. That realization guided her through the divorce, through late nights with newborn twins, and through the decision to build something her way on her terms. Outside the window, snow began falling, soft flakes drifting gently but steadily, almost symbolic. Winter had a habit of warning her when something big was approaching. She didn't believe in superstition, but she respected instinct. Today, something in the air felt different, unsettled. The wind whispered through the cracks of the building as if urging her to prepare. She glanced at the framed photo of her twins again. A quiet shift stirred in her chest. Something was coming, something she had spent 2 years praying would never collide with the life she built. Yet destiny has its own timing, like winter storms that arrive without warning. And New Jersey winter had just begun speaking. Franca had not always lived in quiet stability. There was a time when her life moved so quickly that she barely recognized her own reflection, much less her priorities. That season began the night she met Joshua at a charity gala in New Jersey, long before the twins were even a thought. She remembered stepping into the ballroom, the air warm with conversation and soft music. It wasn't her kind of place, but she was helping a friend. She wore a simple dress, nothing extravagant. Yet when she entered, Joshua noticed her immediately. He approached her with a confidence that didn't feel forced. He wasn't loud, wasn't showy, just observant. His presence carried a calm that made her curious. They talked for 20 minutes that night, then an hour, then 2, the rest of the event fading around them like background noise. She remembered thinking how unusual it was to feel understood by someone who came from a completely different world. That difference became clearer once they started dating. Joshua lived in a polished environment, structured, orderly, quiet, in the way wealthy spaces often are. His family believed in legacy, reputation, and image. Their dinners were calm but stiff, filled with polite conversations that rarely drifted into personal truth. Franca's world was the opposite. She came from a New Jersey community where love was loud, laughter came from the stomach, and aunties pulled you aside to tell you the truth, whether you asked or not. Sundays were for church. Holidays meant crowding into someone's house with too much food, and decisions were made with heart and honesty. It wasn't a world Joshua rejected. He simply didn't understand it. When they married, the contrast between their upbringings didn't immediately cause problems. In fact, in the early days, it brought balance. He admired her independence. She admired his discipline. He introduced her to quiet weekends in Manhattan. She brought him to backyard gatherings where kids ran in circles and grown folks argued about whose grill was better. For a while, they blended beautifully. But time has a way of magnifying small cracks. Joshua's family had unspoken expectations for their daughter-in-law. She should sit on advisory boards, host fundraisers, network at political gatherings, and fit into a mold built long before she arrived. These weren't demands spoken aloud, but the pressure lingered around every event they attended. Eyes followed her. Conversations shifted toward legacy and image. She felt the weight of being assessed. Franca tried, truly tried, to exist in that world with grace, but she felt herself shrinking, losing the sense of identity she fought to build her whole life. Joshua didn't always notice. He was caught between loving her and honoring the traditions he grew up in. He wasn't unkind, just unaware. The breaking point wasn't loud or dramatic. It came during a quiet evening when Joshua asked why she didn't want to join a new foundation project his mother recommended. Franca finally told him the truth. I want to build something with my own name on it, not something handed to me. Joshua misinterpreted the statement. He thought she meant pride. She meant existence, her own path, not one shaped by his family's expectations. Days later, they sat in a lawyer's office signing separation papers. No shouting, no blame, just disappointment. Neither could fully articulate. It was the most painful peace she had ever experienced. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, she sat in a small clinic staring at an ultrasound screen. 2 heartbeats, 2 lives. Twins. She held the printout tightly, her breath trembling but steady. She imagined the chaos Joshua's world would bring if they knew. Inheritance questions, legal teams, family interference, public attention. She didn't want her children growing up like assets. She wanted them to grow up as kids, free, loved, uncomplicated. So she made the hardest decision of her life. She didn't tell him. She moved into a smaller place, built her company quietly, and raised her twins with unwavering intention. Nights were exhausting. Days were long. Money was tight. But peace lived there, even when life was challenging. Every milestone, the first kicks, first cries, first steps, belonged to her alone. She wondered sometimes how Joshua would react if he knew. But she silenced the thought. He had his world, and she had hers. Yet destiny, stubborn as winter weather, wasn't finished with them. The closer the twins grew to their second birthday, the more their personalities reminded her of Joshua. Their expressions, their stubbornness, their intelligence. It all pointed back to the man she once loved. And it terrified her, because no matter how carefully she built her peace, life always had its own way of shifting the ground beneath her feet. Franca had always believed that life whispered warnings before anything major happened. Sometimes it was a shift in the wind. Sometimes it was silence in a place that was usually noisy. That Thursday morning, it was the envelope sitting on her desk, thick, pale, and sealed with a corporate emblem she recognized immediately. Her stomach tightened before she even opened it. She tore the seal and scanned the first few lines. Her breath left her body slowly. An audit, not just any audit, Joshua's company. She sat back in her chair as the weight of the moment settled over her like the winter frost outside. Out of all the small logistics firms in the region, Out of all the countless independent consultants his corporation could have selected, they had chosen hers. It wasn't personal. She knew that, but it felt like the universe had a sharp sense of humor. Her twins toddled around the office in the next room, one humming, the other knocking toy blocks together. The sound grounded her. She folded the letter and pressed it against her knee, trying to steady her thoughts. She had spent 2 years avoiding any overlap between her world and Joshua's. 2 focused, disciplined years. Yet here he was, returning through paperwork. The audit was scheduled for Friday morning. Less than 24 hours to prepare. Franca took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "We'll handle it," not because she felt ready, but because motherhood demanded confidence even in uncertain moments. Friday arrived with icy wind sweeping across Newark. Franca arrived early, tidied her office, reviewed her reports, and set up a small play area in the back room for the twins. She instructed her assistant to keep an eye on them. Her plan was to maintain full professionalism and keep the children completely out of sight. At 10:07 a.m., a sleek black SUV pulled up outside. Her heart stopped. Joshua stepped out. Not a representative, not a manager, not a hired auditor. Joshua. He wore a navy overcoat tailored to perfection, the kind of clothing that made him look like he belonged in boardrooms, not on her modest business block. He stood for a moment outside, taking in the storefront, as though assessing how much of her world he had never truly known. Franca inhaled, straightened her posture, and opened the door before he could knock. Their eyes met. History moved between them like a quiet current. "Franca," he said, voice low, steady. "Joshua." She nodded. "You're here personally. I like to oversee new regional audits." A small pause, and I saw your name on the file. There it was, the first crack of genuine tension. Not hostile, not cold, just a mixture of surprise, discomfort, and unspoken questions. Neither of them dared voice. "Come in," she said simply. He stepped inside, and instantly the atmosphere changed. The office carried her energy. Warm, efficient, personal. The framed photos, the organized shelves, the clean layout. Joshua glanced around, not with judgment, but with quiet appreciation. "You built this," he said. "Yes, I did." He opened his folder. "Let's begin." They moved into professional rhythm. Documents exchanged, procedures reviewed, questions answered. Joshua's face remained focused, but his eyes occasionally drifted to the small details around the office that whispered how much of Franca's life he had missed. Then, a soft giggle. Joshua frowned slightly, glancing toward the hallway. Franca froze. Her assistant must have stepped out for a moment, and toddlers, especially hers, had the uncanny ability to sense when curiosity should take the lead. Before she could react, her son waddled into the doorway, wide-eyed, steady, familiar in a way that struck like lightning. Joshua stared. His jaw shifted. The resemblance was impossible to overlook. Then her daughter appeared, clutching a toy, blinking up at him with the same expression he used to make when he was thinking deeply. The room grew heavy. Franca whispered, "Wait." But before she could guide them back, her daughter pointed at Joshua with pure innocence. "You look like us." A moment that shattered whatever structure Joshua had built around himself. He looked at Franca slowly, as if seeing 2 years of missing time unfold in an instant. His breath caught as realization washed over him. His face changed. Not anger, not accusation, but something more complicated, more human. Recognition, understanding, and a quiet ache. She didn't look away. Yes. Silence wrapped itself around all 4 of them. For the first time, Joshua didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a man learning he had children. Real children. 2 years too late, and nothing in his world had ever prepared him for that truth. Saturday morning settled over New Jersey with its usual calm, but nothing about today felt ordinary for Joshua. He stood outside Franca's townhouse, the cold brushing against his face as he looked at the quiet neighborhood. This wasn't a gated community or a polished estate. Cars lined the street. Neighbors waved at each other. Kids shouted while chasing a basketball. It had a lived-in warmth, nothing like the refined quiet he grew up in. He took a slow breath before knocking. Franca opened the door, casual and comfortable, in a soft sweater and leggings. Her curls were pulled back, no makeup, no formality. Yet she carried a confidence that filled the space. "You're here," she said. "You invited me," he replied gently. "Come inside." He stepped into her home, and instantly he was hit with the scent of breakfast. Toast, eggs, something sweet simmering on the stove. The living room was scattered with toys. Tiny socks. Small jackets hung on hooks. It looked lived in. Warm, real. He looked around slowly. "This is different." "It's normal," Franca said. "Something money doesn't replace." Before he could respond, 2 small figures darted around the corner. The twins. Her daughter ran toward him with no hesitation, holding a toy phone. "You come play?" Joshua blinked, unsure if he should kneel or stand still. Play?" Her son marched up beside her, staring at Joshua with a seriousness far beyond his age. Then he held up a plastic spoon coated in applesauce. Franca covered a laugh. "They've been waiting for you." Joshua opened his mouth, and a glob of applesauce landed on his shirt. Her daughter gasped dramatically. Her son grinned. Franca burst into laughter, leaning against the wall. Joshua looked down at the smear. "I wear this style often," he said dryly. Franca shook her head, wiping tears of laughter. "Welcome to real parenting." The twins grabbed his hands and pulled him toward their play area before he could process the moment. They dragged him onto the rug, expecting participation, not observation. Her daughter pressed a pretend cup into his hand. "Drink tea." He pretended to sip. Her son immediately corrected him. "No, loud," Franca called from the kitchen. "He means slurp," loudly. Joshua exaggerated a slurp noise. The twins erupted into giggles, collapsing onto him like he had performed the greatest comedy routine on earth. He felt something shift inside him, something he didn't have language for. It wasn't discomfort. It wasn't fear. It was connection. Franca brought a small bowl from the kitchen. "Here, real applesauce for them. Not for your shirt." He smiled faintly. "Noted." He fed her daughter clumsily. Half the spoon made it into her mouth. The other half landed on his hand. Her son pointed at the mess. "Uh-oh," Franca snorted. "You're going to need a towel. Or several." More laughter, more chaos, more warmth than he had felt in years. Something inside him unwound. The tension he carried so often in work meetings, in boardrooms, in strategy planning, it eased, not because he understood this world, but because he was beginning to want to. At one point, her daughter crawled into his lap, resting her head on his chest as though she had known him forever. Her son leaned against his leg, fascinated by the buttons on his coat. Joshua remained completely still. He whispered to Franca, "They trust easily." "No," she said softly. "They trust genuinely. There's a difference." He looked down at the children, their small hands clinging, their eyes full of simple certainty. For the first time, he wondered what life looked like beyond reports, expansion plans, and control. For the first time, he felt something shift inside him that no corporate achievement had ever provided. The unfamiliar world he stepped into wasn't overwhelming him. It was changing him, and he wasn't fighting it. Joshua hadn't expected to spend the entire afternoon at Franca's home, but time slipped by without his permission. Every minute in her space revealed another part of her world he had never truly understood. The neighborhood hummed with life, children riding scooters, someone grilling in a nearby yard, neighbors talking loudly across porches. It was familiar to Franca, effortless for her, but Joshua looked at it with cautious curiosity. "This is normal for you?" he asked, as he watched a group of people debating something across the street. Franca nodded. "It's community. Not perfect, not polished, but we show up for each other." His life didn't work that way. In his environment, neighbors didn't knock unless there was a complaint. Social events were planned weeks ahead. People smiled, but there was distance underneath. Here, people lived fully, freely. Before he could respond, her son tugged on his sleeve. "Come see." Joshua followed the small, determined steps into the hallway, where the bathroom door was already open. Water ran in the tub, steam rising, as Franca tested the temperature with her hand. "They need a bath," she said. "You can help, if you're up for it." Joshua hesitated only a moment. Tell me what to do." Her daughter squealed with excitement and began pulling off her socks. Her son tossed toys into the tub as if preparing for battle. Joshua rolled up his sleeves awkwardly, unsure what came next. Franca placed her daughter into the tub first. "Hold her steady. She likes to splash," which was an understatement. Within seconds, water hit Joshua's shirt, then his arm, then his face. Her daughter laughed so hard she hiccuped. Her son joined the chaos, kicking the water like he was performing in a show. Joshua blinked through the spray, wiped his face, and let out a reluctant laugh. Franca smirked. "Welcome to the real world, Joshua. No assistants, no meetings, just two kids who think bath time is a sport." He reached for a washcloth. "Do I just—" "Yes," she said, gentle. "They're small, but opinionated." He washed their arms, their backs, their tiny hands. It felt strangely significant. Not glamorous, not grand, but grounding. The kind of moment fathers experience every day, but rarely appreciate until it becomes a memory. When bath time ended, Franca wrapped each child in a towel, pressing soft kisses to their cheeks. She moved with practiced ease, while Joshua followed her lead, helping where he could. Her daughter grabbed his finger and didn't let go. That small gesture stayed with him. Later, Franca prepared dinner. Nothing extravagant. Just baked chicken, vegetables, and rice. The twins sat on either side of Joshua, insisting he take bites of their food while he tried to maintain some dignity. Franca laughed from across the table. "You're losing the battle." "I noticed," he said, accepting a spoonful her son insisted on delivering. The house glowed with a warmth Joshua couldn't name. The clatter of silverware, the twins' chatter, Franca humming softly while pouring juice. It felt like something he had always been adjacent to, but never part of. When the twins finished eating, Franca carried them to the living room to settle down. Joshua followed her quietly. She laid the kids on a soft blanket, both of them already drifting towards sleep. He watched her tuck them in, smoothing their hair, whispering something gentle. When she stood, he finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me?" It wasn't angry. It wasn't an accusation. It was a quiet ache. Franca took a slow breath. "Because I wasn't sure your world would let them be children. I didn't want them raised by expectations or pressure. I didn't want lawyers involved. I didn't want your family seeing them as heirs before seeing them as human." Joshua dropped his gaze, realizing the weight of what she carried alone. "I would never hurt them," he said softly. "I know that," she replied. "But your world, it's loud, demanding, complicated. I needed peace. They needed peace." Joshua nodded, absorbing her truth, piece by piece. He wasn't defending himself. He wasn't explaining. He was listening, fully, maybe for the first time. "I want to change," he said. "Not for show, for them, for you." Franca met his eyes, searching for sincerity. It was there, quiet but real. "You're already changing," she said. "Today was proof." He glanced at the twins sleeping peacefully, their small chests rising and falling in rhythm. Something inside him shifted again. Not a dramatic break, but a soft, steady realignment. He didn't belong in her world yet, but he wanted to. And for Joshua, that desire alone was the beginning of transformation. Joshua returned to Manhattan late that night, still carrying the faint smell of baby lotion on his sleeves. He didn't change his clothes right away. He didn't rush into emails or conference calls. He simply sat on the edge of his penthouse bed, staring at the city lights stretching beyond the glass. Everything outside looked sharp, structured, efficient. The opposite of Franca's warm, chaotic living room. For the first time in years, the skyline didn't comfort him. By Monday morning, he was back in his tower, surrounded by polished floors, quiet halls, and assistants who moved with silent precision. His boardroom was already filled when he entered. Executives in suits, folders stacked neatly, expressions serious. The energy shifted as soon as he took his seat at the head of the table. One advisor cleared his throat. "We reviewed the regional audit assignments. I noticed you personally oversaw one of the independent logistics firms in Newark." Another added, "Unusual choice, Joshua. Your time is better used on large-scale contracts." He folded his hands. "I wanted a first-hand look. Is this firm useful to us?" a director asked. Joshua's pulse tightened. He thought of Franca's pride, her determination, the framed photos of the twins, the clean ledgers she maintained without shortcuts or favors. "It's not an acquisition target," he replied, "but it's a strong company, well managed." A murmur of confusion passed around the table. His decisions rarely needed explanation. Then came the question he anticipated. Should we pressure them for integration into our system? They're small enough to fold easily. Joshua's jaw tightened. "No, we will support them, not absorb them." Silence dropped like a weight. An executive leaned forward. "But our expansion will continue," Joshua interrupted calmly. "Just not by eliminating businesses that are thriving independently." His choice was final, and they knew it. But they didn't understand it. He didn't care. For once, expansion wasn't the priority. After the meeting ended, Joshua closed his office door and let out a slow breath. He replayed the weekend in his mind. The twins' laughter, Franca's steady voice, the softness of bath time, the weight of honesty in the conversation they had shared. Everything felt different now. By Tuesday evening, he found himself standing outside Franca's townhouse again. He hadn't announced his visit formally. He simply texted her, "Can I stop by?" "Only if it's a good time." She had replied, "Come." When she opened the door, her expression carried no surprise. The twins squealed when they saw him, running toward him with the kind of excitement that pierced directly into his chest. Her daughter extended her arms. "Pick up!" He lifted her, and she rested her head on his shoulder instantly. Her son grabbed Joshua's hand and tugged him toward the couch. "They like you," Franca said from the doorway. He looked at her softly. "I like them too." They spent the next hour stacking blocks, reading picture books, and attempting a simple puzzle that somehow turned into two toddlers giggling uncontrollably while Joshua tried to keep up. Franca watched quietly, noting the shift in him, the patience, the gentleness, the willingness to follow instead of lead. Later, after the twins were settled in their small beds, Franca joined him in the living room. The room was dim, lit only by a floor lamp. The quiet between them wasn't tense. It was full, warm, familiar. "You handled the board today?" she asked. He nodded. "They want to absorb your company. And you told them no?" "Yes." She studied him. "Why?" He hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because saying it aloud meant acknowledging the shift happening inside him. "You built something with your own strength," he said. "It deserves respect, not takeover." Franca didn't speak immediately. She simply watched him, the way she used to when they were married, as if she could see through the layers he hid behind. "I appreciate that," she said, finally. He sat beside her, close but not imposing. "I'm trying, Franca. I can see that." There was a moment, subtle, quiet, when their hands brushed on the couch. Neither pulled away. The warmth of that touch lingered longer than either expected. It wasn't romance rushing back. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was trust forming slowly, intentionally. Joshua left that night with a small smile tugging at his lips. Before climbing into the SUV, he glanced back at the townhouse, the light glowing softly from the window. He realized something as he drove away. He wasn't visiting out of obligation. He was returning to something he didn't know he missed. Until now. Saturday morning sunlight drifted across Franca's living room as she folded tiny shirts fresh from the dryer. The twins played nearby, stacking blocks with the same intensity they gave to everything. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet morning she cherished, until her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expecting a message from a client. Instead, she froze at the headline, flashing across a financial blog. Tech billionaire. Joshua expands audit reach. Rumors suggest aggressive acquisition strategy. Her heart dropped. The article continued with bold claims that his recent visits to Newark firms were part of a plan to absorb small businesses, that early targets were already identified, that his company was preparing for a major sweep in the logistics sector. Her chest tightened. She scrolled further, and there it was, her company's name listed in a speculative paragraph. The room suddenly felt smaller. Everything she and Joshua had begun rebuilding, trust, communication, fragile progress, wavered under the weight of that headline. She stood still, listening to the twins giggle, trying to steady her breathing. Was he playing a long game? Did he use their reconnection to deceive her company? Had she misread his sincerity? She didn't want to jump to conclusions, But pain had a way of resurfacing with old memories. She remembered legal language. She remembered pressure from his past advisors. She remembered promises that felt too polished. She glanced at her children, who looked up at her with innocent certainty. She owed them clarity, not fear. She grabbed her coat. "Come on," she whispered to the twins, dropping them off at her sister's place before heading to Joshua's office. By the time she arrived, her pulse matched the elevator's slow climb. When the doors opened, Joshua's assistant recognized her immediately and stepped aside without question. Joshua stood by his window, Manhattan stretching behind him, as if emphasizing the distance between their worlds. When he turned, his expression softened instantly. "Franca is everything." She held up her phone. "Did you see this?" He scanned the headline, his jaw tightening, eyes narrowing not at her, but at the implication. "This is wrong," he said firmly. "Is it?" She challenged. He stepped closer. "Yes." Her voice was steady, but pained. "I've lived in enough worlds where words look one way but actions mean something else. I need the truth, Joshua." He exhaled slowly, choosing honesty over defensiveness. "I didn't authorize this article, and I didn't leak anything to make it happen. Someone is spinning a story for clicks. That's what I need to hear," she replied. "But I need proof, too." Without hesitation, he went to his desk, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out the finalized audit report, stamped, signed, and dated. The document clearly stated her company would remain independent, receive partnership access, not be targeted for acquisition. He placed it in her hands. "This is the truth," he said. "No tricks. No hidden clauses. I protected your company because you built it with integrity." She studied the paper, feeling the tension in her shoulders loosen, though not entirely. "And the rumors?" she asked. "I'll address them publicly," he said. "But I'm telling you now, no part of this report was designed to hurt you." Her breath softened. "I needed to know." He nodded. "I know you did. And you deserve transparency. Always." A quiet moment grew between them, heavy, but no longer painful. Trust began stitching itself back together, thread by thread. When she finally looked up, his face carried something deeper than defense, sincerity, mixed with the quiet ache of wanting her to believe him. "Franca," he said gently, "I would never use our children or you for business leverage. Not then. Not now." She didn't look away. "I believe you," she said softly. The strain between them eased. The air shifted. Something unspoken pulsed between them. A warmth, a closeness, a memory of what they once were, and a hint of what they might become. Romantic tension didn't rush in. It arrived gradually, settling into the space like a familiar rhythm returning after a long pause. "You came straight here?" he asked. "Yes, that means something." She didn't deny it. The moment felt like the beginning of something fragile and hopeful. Trust regained, connection deepening, and a spark neither of them could ignore anymore. Joshua didn't waste time. After Franca left his office that day, The blog article shook him just as much as it did her. It reminded him how easily assumptions could erode fragile trust. It also reminded him that the world he came from thrived on speculation, and if he didn't take control of the narrative, it would twist everything he cared about. He called an emergency meeting with his top executives early the next morning. They entered the boardroom, expecting a defensive explanation. Instead, they found a man ready to change direction. "We're restructuring the audit strategy," Joshua announced. "Effective immediately." A director frowned. "In what way?" "We're shifting from acquisition-driven assessments to collaborative support," he said. "No independent firm will be pressured into joining us. We focus on partnerships instead." Another executive blinked. "This is a complete shift from our current model. Investors will have questions." Joshua nodded. "Then I'll answer them." Pressure filled the room, but Joshua's voice carried clarity, not doubt. He outlined new standards based on fairness, transparency, and respect for smaller businesses. The more he spoke, the more he realized this change wasn't just about protecting Franca's company. It was about becoming the man he should have been from the beginning. When the meeting ended, his assistant approached him quietly. "Should I prepare statements for the press?" Joshua shook his head. "Not yet. This is about action before explanation." Felt right. Later that week, he visited Franca's townhouse again, not with the weight of business on his shoulders, but with the intention of showing up as a father. When she opened the door, the twins immediately charged toward him with unfiltered excitement. Her son grabbed his pant leg while her daughter extended her arms, demanding to be picked up. Franca leaned against the frame, watching the scene unfold. "They're getting attached." "Good," he said with a soft smile. "I want them to know I'm here." The afternoon unfolded with a rhythm that was slowly becoming familiar. They fed the kids lunch together. Joshua sliced fruit, while Franca portioned out pasta into small bowls. The twins insisted on sitting between them, turning the simple meal into a lively mess. At one point, her daughter playfully smeared sauce on Joshua's cheek. Franca tried to hide her laughter, but he caught her. "You're enjoying this," he said. "A little," she admitted, handing him a napkin. When the twins went down for their nap, the house quieted. Franca and Joshua remained at the kitchen table, lingering over tea. Their shoulders brushed lightly when they both reached for the sugar at the same time. Neither pulled back quickly. The warmth between them wasn't loud. It was a slow pulse, steady and undeniable. Franca noticed something different in him. Not just effort, presence. He wasn't multitasking. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't distracted by the demands of his empire. He was here, fully, completely. She sipped her tea. "You handled that article well." "I handled it because I didn't want you doubting me. That matters more than you know," she replied quietly. He held her gaze. The silence between them softening into something meaningful. I want you to trust that I'm not the same man you left. Her breath caught slightly, not from surprise, but from the vulnerability in his tone. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was trying to be honest. Before she could respond, the twins began stirring in the next room. Joshua stood first, instinctively moving toward them. Franca watched him go, absorbing the shift she had prayed for, but never expected to witness. Later that afternoon, Franca needed to run a quick errand, and Joshua offered to watch the twins. She hesitated at first, not because she doubted his intentions, but because she knew parenting required more than good intentions. "Are you sure you can handle them alone?" she asked with a small smirk. "I negotiated international contracts," he said. "I can handle 2 toddlers." She raised a brow. "You about that?" He wasn't, but he wanted to be. She returned 40 minutes later to find the living room scattered with toys, tiny socks, and half-finished juice boxes. Joshua sat on the floor, both twins leaning against him, as he read a picture book with exaggerated voices. He looked up when he noticed her. "They're intact," he said proudly. Franca laughed, a warm sound that filled the room. "You did good." The twins ran to her, but turned back to Joshua with equal affection, a clear sign that he was no longer a visitor in their hearts. Over the next few days, word quietly spread through Franca's community. Neighbors saw Joshua playing outside with her son. Others saw him carrying groceries or adjusting a car seat. People who once viewed him as an outsider began greeting him with nods, smiles, and eventually conversation. He didn't force acceptance. He earned it slowly, and Franca noticed. The man she once felt overshadowed by was becoming a man who honored her space, her community, her children, and her heart. Piece by piece, without rushing, their worlds were no longer colliding. They were beginning to align. The following Saturday, Franca's neighborhood came alive earlier than usual. Someone down the block was hosting a casual gathering. Music floating from open windows, grills firing up, people moving in and out of driveways with plates and laughter. It was the kind of atmosphere Franca grew up in, natural and unforced. It was also the kind of world Joshua had never stepped into without standing out. Still, when Franca invited him with a simple, "We're going to the gathering down the street. You can come if you want," he didn't hesitate. "I'll come," he said. She tried to hide the surprise in her eyes, but he caught it anyway. When they arrived, neighbors immediately recognized Franca and waved her over. But their attention shifted when they saw Joshua walking beside her, carrying their twins, one in each arm. Children stared, adults observed quietly. It wasn't hostile. It was curiosity mixed with a hint of caution. Joshua felt the pressure of unfamiliar eyes, but he didn't shrink. He adjusted his grip on the twins, offered a polite nod, and followed Franca's lead. One of her neighbors, a broad-shouldered man named Terence, approached first. He had known Franca since childhood, and protected her like a sibling. He looked Joshua up and down. "So you're the father?" Joshua held his gaze. "Yes, I am." Terence nodded slowly. "Good. They deserve a present dad." Joshua didn't argue. "I agree." The tension broke instantly. Terence gestured toward the grill. "Come get a plate." Joshua exhaled quietly, relieved. As the afternoon unfolded, the neighborhood embraced its natural energy. Kids ran past with bubbles and chalk. Older women shared stories near a picnic table. Someone played classic soul music from a speaker, giving the entire block a warm pulse. Joshua followed Franca from group to group, watching the way people gravitated toward her. She laughed loudly, hugged people tightly, listened with sincerity. She was rooted here, grounded here. Seeing her like this made something inside him soften further. "Your neighborhood is lively," Joshua said carefully. Franca grinned. "This is mild." He chuckled under his breath. "I believe you." A group of kids ran toward him suddenly, shouting, "Do it again! Do the airplane thing!" Joshua blinked. "The what?" Her son demonstrated by lifting his arms. "Up!" He had lifted them like airplanes once. A simple moment he never expected to be remembered. Now, every kid nearby wanted a turn. Franca laughed as Joshua surrendered, lifting children into the air while trying not to lose balance. "You're good with them," she said when he finally returned to her side. "I'm learning," he replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Humility looks good on you." He turned to her, eyes lingering a little longer. "Maybe I needed this." She didn't disagree. As the sun began setting, the music softened. People settled into small groups, talking about life, work, and family. Franca and Joshua found themselves sitting together on the front steps of her friend's porch, the twins asleep on a blanket beside them. For a moment, there was nothing but quiet between them. A comfortable, full quiet. "You fit in today," she said softly. "I tried," he answered. "Your world. It feels honest." She studied him. "You handled everything better than I expected." "Did you expect me to fail?" "No," she said. "I just didn't expect you to enjoy it." He looked down at the twins, peaceful and warm under a small blanket. "I enjoy anything that brings me closer to them." Her heart pulled tight at the sincerity in his voice. Their shoulders brushed lightly. Neither moved away. The porch light cast a soft glow on their faces. The street was quieter now, the atmosphere gentle and still. When their eyes met, the air between them shifted. Wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It was the kind of moment that naturally drew two people closer. Joshua leaned in slightly, not boldly, but with the hesitance of a man who didn't want to misstep. Franca felt her breath catch. She didn't pull away. She didn't lean in further. She simply let the closeness settle. Then she whispered, "Not yet." Joshua paused, nodding with understanding rather than disappointment. "Whenever you're ready," he said quietly. Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile. The moment wasn't broken. It was simply placed on hold, allowed to mature in its own time. Trust wasn't something you rushed. Love wasn't something you reclaimed overnight. Piece by piece, they were rebuilding something stronger than what they once had. And for the first time since their separation, Franca felt the possibility of a future that didn't scare her. Joshua didn't reach for her hand, but he stayed seated beside her long after the street emptied, a silent promise that he wasn't going anywhere. Early Monday morning, Joshua stood in front of the tall mirror in his penthouse bedroom, adjusting his tie. He wasn't dressing for battle, but the weight in his chest reminded him that today demanded strength he had not needed in years. The events of the last few weeks, discovering the twins, reconnecting with Franca, embracing fatherhood, had reshaped him quietly but permanently. Today, he would be tested by the two forces that shaped most of his adult life, his family and his company. He arrived at his parents' home first. The mansion stood in sharp contrast to Franca's lively neighborhood, silent, structured, immaculate. His mother greeted him with a carefully measured smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We saw the article," she said, before he even sat down. "Which one?" he asked flatly. "The one questioning your new partnerships. The one calling your recent choices uncharacteristic. Investors are confused. So are we." His father folded his hands. "You built your legacy on discipline and ambition. Why change what works?" Joshua's jaw flexed, but he kept his tone steady. "Because I'm not living for headlines. I'm choosing alignment." His mother frowned slightly. "This is about that woman, isn't it?" He didn't flinch. "Her name is Franca, and she built something valuable. I'm not letting anyone reduce her work to a business target." His father leaned forward. "Your personal life must remain separate from your professional decisions." Joshua shook his head slowly. "Not when my professional decisions impact people I care about. Not when fairness is on the line." Silence stretched through the room. They weren't used to this version of him. Grounded, firm, confident in a direction they didn't shape. His father exhaled. "If you change too much, you risk destabilizing everything." Joshua rose to his feet, then let it shift. "I'm not afraid of growth." He left before they could respond. He didn't need their approval. Not anymore. The boardroom was next. Executives waited around the long, polished table. Some guarded, some curious. Joshua took his seat, calm but resolute. The moment he opened the meeting, the challenges began. One director spoke first. "Your announcement about restructuring the audit model has raised concerns. Our investors expect aggressive expansion, not collaborative practices." Another added, "Your recent behavior appears distracted." Distracted. The word echoed in his mind, but it did not sting. If anything, it clarified just how deeply disconnected he had been before recent events. "I am not distracted," Joshua said. "I am focused. More than I've ever been." A vice president leaned forward. "Partnerships are slower, less profitable. Small firms don't always offer long-term gain." Joshua met his eyes directly. Short-term gain isn't the measure of success. Sustainability is. They exchanged uneasy glances. Another director asked carefully, "Is your decision influenced by the Newark firm?" Joshua didn't shy away. "My decision is influenced by fairness and integrity. The Newark firm is independent. It stays that way." A shift rippled across the room. Some resisted. Others absorbed the truth quietly. Joshua continued, "We will not use dominance to build our influence. We will build through relationships, respect, support, transparency." Someone scoffed lightly. "This sounds like personal philosophy, not corporate strategy." Joshua shook his head. "It's both." And this time, no one spoke. He took a breath and said the words that marked the turning point. "The era of extraction is over. We move forward through partnership. That, our new model." His steady voice left no room for negotiation. The board realized this wasn't temporary. This wasn't emotional. This was transformation, the kind that doesn't reverse. After the meeting adjourned, several executives approached him individually. Some questioned, some accepted, some even supported the shift. None of it changed his resolve. He paused at the window, watching the city that once demanded everything from him. For the first time, he felt aligned with something greater than ambition. He was no longer building an empire. He was building a life worth living inside it. That evening, Joshua arrived at Franca's townhouse just as the street lamps flickered on. The winter air carried a sharp chill, but warm light glowed from Franca's windows. He hesitated for a moment, steadying himself. After facing his family and the board earlier, this visit felt like the only place he wanted to be. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. Franca opened the door before he knocked. "They're a little fussy tonight," she said softly. "Teething." He stepped inside and immediately heard the small cries echoing from the living room. The twins were curled on the couch, their cheeks flushed, their tiny fists rubbing at their faces. They looked miserable. "They're hurting," Franca said, lifting her daughter gently. "It's one of those nights." Joshua moved toward her son, who reached for him without hesitation. The small gesture pulled something deep inside Joshua, something he didn't know he could feel this strongly. Her son buried his face into Joshua's chest, whimpering softly. Joshua rubbed his back in slow circles. "Hey, it's okay. I've got you." Franca glanced at them, surprised at how naturally he soothed the child. "You're getting good at this. I'm learning from you," he replied. Franca smiled, though worry remained in her eyes. She handed Joshua a small, chilled teething ring. "Try this." He placed it gently against the baby's gums, and the crying eased a little. Meanwhile, Franca rocked her daughter, humming low and steady, letting her voice drift through the quiet house. It wasn't long before the two adults found themselves moving in synced rhythm, each comforting one child, sharing the same focus, the same purpose. After an hour of slow calming, the twins' cries softened into tired murmurs. Franca whispered, "Let's take them to the hallway. The dim light helps them settle." Together, they carried the twins into the softly lit corridor. The hush of the moment wrapped around them, warm, intimate, and strangely grounding. Franca leaned against the wall. While holding her daughter, Joshua stood opposite her, cradling her son. The world outside felt distant. "Thank you for coming," Franca said quietly. "This kind of night can be overwhelming." "I want to be here," Joshua said, "not just for the easy moments, but for the hard ones, too." His honesty lingered between them. Her daughter whimpered again, and Franca kissed her forehead. "They're growing so fast." Joshua nodded. "I keep thinking about everything I missed." Franca's expression softened. "You're here now. That's what matters." Joshua lowered his gaze to the little boy resting against him, then looked back at her. Being here tonight, it made the boardroom feel irrelevant. She studied him carefully. "That's a big statement." "It's the truth," he said. "I spent years chasing things that never filled anything real. Today proved that my priorities were wrong." The sincerity in his voice pushed gently against her guard. "Joshua," she started. He stepped a little closer, not invading her space, but signaling that his next words were intentional. "I need to tell you something." She met his eyes. "Go on." "I love you," he said softly. There was no dramatic build-up, no grand gesture, just truth, spoken in a quiet hallway while two sleepy children rested in their parents' arms. The kind of moment that mattered more than any speech he had ever given. Franca inhaled slowly. "You're saying that now, after everything has changed for you emotionally and professionally. I need to know it's not just because you're reconnecting with the kids." "It's not," he said firmly. "I love them, but I love you separately." I never stopped. Her heart tugged painfully, not from fear, but from the weight of everything she had held back for years. She looked down at her daughter, then back at Joshua. "I care about you too, but I need to move slowly. I can't jump into something just because it feels good in the moment." "I understand," he said. "I won't rush you." Their eyes held for a long, quiet second. The closeness between them deepened. Not rushed, not fragile, but rooted in something real. Her daughter reached out, pressing a small hand against Joshua's arm. Her son reached toward Franca, wanting her other hand. Franca and Joshua exchanged a gentle smile as they shifted to hold both children together. For the first time, they felt like a unit, not perfect, not defined, but genuinely connected. The babies settled into sleep. The hallway felt warmer, and the truth settled quietly between the adults. They were closer than ever, not through romance, through presence, responsibility, and honest emotion. Brick by brick, the foundation of something lasting was forming. The next few days unfolded with a rhythm no one expected, not even Franca. Instead of slipping back into his high-rise world, Joshua continued showing up after work, arriving still in his sweater from earlier visits instead of polished business attire. He had finally learned that being here wasn't about performance. It was about presence. On Wednesday evening, he arrived just as Franca was attempting to get dinner started, with the twins pulling at her legs. "You're early," she said, slightly breathless. "I figured you might need backup," Joshua replied. She raised an eyebrow. "That obvious?" He nodded toward the twins. "Your son has attached himself to your ankle, like he's guarding territory." Franca laughed. "Welcome to my world." Joshua crouched, opening his arms. "Come here, buddy." The toddler detached and ran straight to him, nearly knocking him backward. Joshua stumbled, but caught his balance, then gave Franca a triumphant smirk. "See? I'm getting better at this." "You're improving," Franca said. "Still clumsy, but improving." He grinned at her. That soft, unguarded grin she only remembered from their best days. Later, they moved to the kitchen. Franca handed him a simple task: rinse vegetables for dinner. It seemed safe. Emphasis on seemed. She turned her back for 10 seconds. 10. When she turned around, water covered half the counter, and the twins stood cheering as if watching a live show. "Joshua!" she gasped. "I swear I only rinsed them," he defended, holding the dripping bowl helplessly. Her shoulders shook, first with frustration, and then with laughter she couldn't hold back. "Why are they cheering?" he asked. "Because you look like a magician who failed his trick," she replied. Her daughter clapped again, shouting something that sounded like, "Do it again." Joshua bowed dramatically. "The audience has spoken." Franca covered her face. "Please don't encourage them." But she was smiling when she said it. Moments like these didn't feel forced. They felt earned, the type of humor that grows only when two people are learning each other all over again. After dinner, they moved to the living room, letting the twins roam freely. Joshua sat on the rug, cross-legged, while Franca folded laundry on the couch. Her son crawled into his lap and promptly fell asleep in the most inconvenient position possible, face down, arms stretched across Joshua's chest. Joshua froze. Help?" Franca chuckled. "He trusts you. That's a good sign." He shifted slightly, careful not to wake the child, and looked up at her. The way he said, The next words held more weight than he intended. "I'm glad he does." Franca paused mid-fold. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the heater and the gentle tapping of her daughter's toys on the hardwood floor. Then Franca spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "They like you a lot." "I'm grateful for that," he answered. "I want to keep earning it." Her eyes met his, warm, guarded, curious, not a yes, not a no, but no longer fear. Steps, gentle ones. Friday brought another unexpected shift. A neighbor knocked on Franca's door to drop off a dish. When she saw Joshua inside, she blinked. "Oh, you're here again," she said, smiling with a hint of teasing. Joshua straightened politely. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him. "Well, it's good to see consistency. Keep that up." As she left, Franca bit back a laugh. "I think you just passed a neighborhood test." Joshua exhaled dramatically. "That was a test? Everything around here is a test," she joked. But she meant it. He had passed. Word spread gently through the block. Not gossip, but acknowledgement. He was trying. He was showing up. He wasn't just the wealthy ex. He was a man learning to integrate into a world that prized honesty over influence. And slowly, people softened toward him. That night, after the twins were asleep, Joshua helped her clean the kitchen. They stood side by side, drying dishes. Their hands brushed once, lightly, then again, this time lingering a second longer. He looked at her. She didn't look away. There was a moment, warm, quiet, magnetic, where everything inside the house seemed to still. His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but undeniably close. "Franca," he whispered. She inhaled softly, but instead of leaning in, she stepped back gently, giving him a small, heartfelt smile. "Not yet." Joshua nodded, not discouraged, but reassured. "I can wait." "You're doing well," she said. "Stay steady." "I will." And she believed him. For the first time in years, she truly believed him. The morning of the press conference arrived with a quiet intensity Joshua hadn't felt in years. Not fear, clarity. He stood backstage in a fitted charcoal suit, holding the speech he had rewritten 3 times in the last 48 hours. Every line had been crafted with intention, not to impress shareholders, but to honor the growth he fought for. Franca watched the live stream from her office in Newark, the twins playing gently on the rug beside her. She wasn't nervous for him. Not anymore. She had witnessed the shift in him up close. Today, the world would see it too. When Joshua stepped onto the stage, cameras clicked instantly, screens lit up, and reporters leaned forward. Yet he didn't approach the podium with the rigid posture of the man he once was. He looked lighter, grounded, present. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "My company has spent years expanding through acquisition. But recently, I had to ask myself a question I had avoided for too long. What does growth mean if it erases the people who built their dreams from the ground up? The room quieted. He continued, "Effective today, our expansion model will center on ethical partnerships. We will support independent firms without consuming them. We will share resources without removing ownership. Growth does not need to erase identity." Screens across the nation displayed his words in real time. A reporter raised her hand. "Is this shift connected to the Newark firm you recently audited?" Joshua didn't flinch. "Yes," he answered plainly. "That firm is led by someone whose leadership represents everything strong businesses should value: discipline, integrity, and vision. She built something worth honoring, and her company will continue to operate independently, as it should." Franca felt her breath catch. Not because he mentioned her, he hadn't, but because he protected her without exposing her. Will this new approach slow your financial momentum? Another reporter asked. Joshua shook his head. Success isn't defined by dominance. It's defined by purpose. This is the future we're choosing, and it's the future we're proud of. Lights flashed. Questions continued. Yet Joshua remained steady, calm, and wholehearted, not the polished billionaire they once admired, but a leader finally aligned with his own values. What stood out most was what he did not say. He did not mention the twins. He did not mention Franca by name. He did not sensationalize the personal journey that had shaped the new direction. He protected their privacy like a shield. After the conference, analysts praised his vision. Media outlets commended the shift. Investors reframed their earlier criticism. Even his board acknowledged the clarity behind his decisions. But none of the commentary mattered to Franca as much as the quiet conviction on Joshua's face when he spoke. She saw no performance, no ego, no hunger for applause. She saw a man she once loved, a man she could trust again. When he arrived at her office hours later, he didn't walk in with excitement or pride. He simply stepped through the door, removed his coat, and exhaled softly. "How did I do?" he asked. Franca smiled. "You spoke like a man who knows who he is." Joshua lowered his gaze for a moment. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone." "I know," she replied. "That's what made it powerful." The twins spotted him and ran over instantly. He knelt, scooping them into his arms as they tackled him with unsteady enthusiasm. Their laughter filled the office, and Franca watched the scene with warmth she couldn't hide. Joshua lifted his head and met her eyes. "This was the first time I made a public decision without worrying about legacy." "What did you worry about then?" she asked quietly. "Doing the right thing," he said. For once, that was enough. And at that moment, Franca realized something important. Joshua hadn't just changed for the world to see. He had changed in ways only someone who knew his heart could fully understand. And for the first time in years, she let herself feel hopeful. That evening, the sun dipped behind the New Jersey rooftops, casting warm colors across Franca's living room. The twins were already fed and winding down with picture books scattered across the rug. Franca moved around the kitchen quietly, replaying the press conference in her mind, realizing how deeply Joshua's transformation had settled. A soft knock came at the door. She wiped her hands on a towel and opened it. Joshua stood there, not confident in the usual polished way, but steady, like a man who had walked through fire and come out with clarity instead of fear. His coat was draped over his arm, his posture relaxed. There was no anticipation or nervous energy, only calm intention. "Can I come in?" he asked. "You never have to ask," she said gently. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The twins looked up from their books and immediately toddled toward him. He knelt, held them both close, and for a moment the room felt full, not crowded, not chaotic, complete. When the twins settled again, Joshua rose to his feet and turned toward Franca. His expression had softened into something she hadn't seen in years. Vulnerability without fear. "Franca," he began, "there's something I need to tell you, and I want to say it clearly." She nodded, joining him in the living room, while keeping the twins in view. She sat. He remained standing for a moment, then chose to sit beside her, giving space, not assuming closeness. "I thought today would feel like a victory," he said. "But instead, all I wanted was to be here after it was over." Franca breathed in slowly. "Because this is where life actually happens." He smiled gently. "Exactly." He took a quiet breath, grounding himself. "The other night when I told you I loved you, I meant it with everything in me, but I also knew you weren't ready to respond." Franca didn't speak, letting him continue. "I'm not here to push you," he said softly. "I'm here to be honest again." Her pulse steadied. "Go on." Joshua folded his hands together, looking down briefly before meeting her eyes again. "I want a life with you. Not because of the twins, not because of familiarity, but because loving you is the only part of my past that still feels like truth." Her chest tightened. "And I need you to know," he added gently, "that if you say no to anything more than co-parenting, I will still be here. Nothing will change in the way I show up for the twins or for you." Franca exhaled. Long, slow, emotional. Joshua continued, voice low and sincere. "But if you do want us again, if you believe we can build something healthier, stronger, balanced, then I'm ready." He paused. Then, without theatrics, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small velvet box on the coffee table. Not opening it, not pushing it toward her, just placing it gently, respectfully. "No pressure," he whispered. "No assumptions. This is only here if you want it." Franca stared at the unopened box, her heart thudding with memory, fear love, and realization all at once. She lifted her gaze to him, seeing not the man she left years ago, but the man he had fought hard to become. "Joshua, why now?" she asked. "Because I had to become someone worthy of standing beside you," he said. "Not above you, not ahead of you. Beside you." Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't hide. "You already know I care about you. That never went away." "I know," he said quietly, "but caring isn't the same as choosing." The truth settled between them, gentle, steady. Franca looked down at her hands, then at the twins across the room, and finally back to Joshua. "You've changed in ways I didn't expect," she said. "And the man sitting in front of me now, he feels like someone I can build with, someone I can trust with my heart this time." His breath caught, barely visible, but she noticed. "And yes," she whispered, "I want us again." Joshua didn't move. He waited, letting her lead. Franca reached forward, finally touching the velvet box. Her fingers trembled, not from doubt, but from the weight of choosing him freely. She opened it. Inside sat the same ring, cleaned, restored, shining with new meaning. She lifted her gaze. "Yes, Joshua." He released a breath that felt like years of tension breaking quietly inside him. Then he cupped her face gently, slowly, making sure she had every chance to pull back. She didn't. Their foreheads touched. A soft, grounded moment. Not rushed, not desperate. A choice, a beginning. The twins looked up curiously, as if sensing something important had happened. Franca whispered, "We'll do it right this time." Joshua nodded, eyes warm. Together, the morning of the ceremony felt different from anything Franca had experienced in years. Not grand, not extravagant, simply peaceful. The kind of peace that settles in slowly when the pieces of your life begin to fit without force. New Jersey's early spring light spilled through her bedroom window as she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the soft cream dress she had chosen. It wasn't a gown. It wasn't ornate. It flowed gently, matching the simplicity she valued. A new beginning didn't need glamour. It only needed sincerity. Downstairs, she heard the twins giggling, a sound that had become the heartbeat of her home. She walked to the staircase and paused. Joshua stood there in a tailored suit, holding their son, while their daughter tugged playfully at his tie. The scene warmed her more deeply than she expected. She took a step down. "You clean up well," she teased. He looked up at her, breath catching softly. "You're beautiful." Their daughter clapped, as if approving the exchange. Franca reached the bottom step, smoothing a curl behind her ear. "Are the twins ready?" Joshua nodded proudly. "They're the stars today." The toddlers wore tiny, matching outfits. Simple, comfortable, adorable. They toddled around with the kind of enthusiasm only children carried naturally. This wasn't a royal procession or a high-profile event. It was intimate, grounded, rooted in love. Exactly what Franca wanted. The venue was a small, quiet community space near her neighborhood. Not a cathedral, not a resort, just a warm, welcoming hall decorated with soft lights and flowers donated by neighbors who insisted on helping. Joshua opened the door for her, carrying their son, while Franca held their daughter. People inside turned, smiling warmly, not as spectators, but as supporters. They weren't here for gossip or spectacle. They were here because they cared. The twins were placed at the beginning of the aisle, each holding a small ring of flowers. With gentle encouragement, they toddled forward on wobbly steps, drawing laughter from the guests as they zigzagged instead of walking straight. Their chaos became charm. Their innocence became the perfect opening act. Franca and Joshua followed slowly, side by side, but not touching, allowing the moment its own quiet beauty. When they reached the front, the officiant smiled. "Today isn't about correcting the past," he said. "It's about choosing the future with intention." Franca felt her heart settle. Joshua's expression softened beside her. The vows were simple. No grand speeches, no dramatic declarations, just truth. Franca spoke first. "I spent years learning who I am and what I need. And today I choose to build with you, not under you, not behind you, but with you. Equally, honestly, patiently." Joshua swallowed, emotion tightening his voice. "I once believed strength meant holding everything together alone. But you taught me that real strength is shared. Today I promise presence, humility, and love that doesn't demand anything from you, only invites you to grow with me." Their hands met, warm and steady. The officiant smiled gently. "Then it is my honor to join what has already been reunited." A soft cheer rose. The twins squealed, running toward their parents. Joshua scooped one up, Franca lifted the other, and the four embraced quietly in a circle that felt more sacred than anything spoken. The reception that followed wasn't filled with chandeliers or towering cakes. Instead, tables overflowed with homemade dishes from neighbors, friends, and family who wanted the day to feel like home. Children played near the entrance. Music flowed from a small speaker, warm and familiar. Franca watched Joshua move through the room, speaking humbly with people he once might have overlooked. His posture held no arrogance. His eyes held no distance. He blended into her world with ease, not by pretending, but by belonging. When he returned to her side, he slipped his arm gently around her waist. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Full," she said, honestly. "The best way," he smiled. "Me too." Their daughter tugged on Franca's dress. "Mommy, dance?" So they danced, not perfectly, not gracefully, but joyfully, with their children between them and the community around them. And for the first time in a very long time, Franca felt completely whole. Love is not proven, through grand gestures. It is proven through growth, humility, consistency, and the courage to choose each other again, not from need, but from strength. Identity matters. Self-worth matters. And when two people honor who they are individually, they can build something powerful together. Thank you for listening to this story on Mr. Michael Stories Hub. If this journey touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us share more stories filled with life lessons, hope, and love.